In the last video, I showed you how to do your cuff on your sleeve. Now, before we attach the sleeve into the body of our shirt, we need to close up our side seams. So here's our top. Our side seams are still open at this point. We need to turn this around so we can match up right side with right side. So our side of our back panel matched up with the side of our front. You're going to match up those seams and sew at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure that your bust dart, the fold of your fabric, is pointing down when you sew over this. So at 1/2 inch seam allowance. I've sewn both of my side seams together at 1/2 inch seam allowance and have pressed those open. So now my top is ready for my sleeves to be put in. So for your sleeve, you're going to find your notches. So you should have your single notch for your front and your double notch for your back that's around this curve. From notch to notch, you're going to do 2 parallel basting stitches. One of them is going to be 5/8 of an inch away from this edge, and the other one will be at 3/8 of an inch away from this edge. Okay, I've done those 2 basting stitches. So again, my furthest one in is 5/8 of an inch away from my raw edge. The second one is 3/8 of an inch away from the raw edge. You're going to tie off your threads at the at your single notch, which is near your front, and then you're going to leave your tails that are next to your back notch. From the right side of the fabric, you're going to take your threads and pull them so that you can bring the bobbin thread up towards the right side of the fabric. So now in both of my stitching rows, I've got both threads coming up on both sides. Now you're going to hold both of those bobbin threads. You're gonna take them, hold both of them from each, so the bobbin thread from each row. You're gonna hold that and start to gather your sleeve, gathering in some of the ease of that curve around the arm, around the shoulder, to get it to fit. From this point, you're just gonna gather in a bit and then pull those gathers to where they are even from notch to notch. You want most of your gathers, most of it's going to be at the cap of your sleeve, which you should have a center notch marked. If you've serged and you lost your notches, re-notch them, because those are going to be very helpful for setting in your sleeve. Okay, so I'm just pulling this around till I got a few gathers in here, and the cap of my sleeve starts to kind of fold over like that. Starts to round over. Okay. All right, once I've got those gathers kind of in there, and once I feel like they're kind of dispersed evenly, move this up a little bit. So I feel like these are dispersed evenly, I can start to set my sleeve in. So setting in your sleeve, make sure you're paying attention to your notches so you know if this sleeve needs to fit on the left side or the right side. So I'm gonna find my notch. Okay, so here are my back notches. Here's my front notch. So I always like to look at this from the right side of the garment. So here's my front notch. So this is how it should fit. So this one fits on this side. If you're ever unsure, just look at it as if the pieces were sewn together. Look at it with the right side of your fabric facing upwards. So I can see that my front notch is right here. So that's the front of my sleeve. Here's the front of my shirt. So I know it matches up here. So but I need to sew this right side to right side. So I'm gonna take my front and flip it around, and then take my sleeve underneath and pull it through so that these raw edges of the sleeve and the armhole are matching up. So from here, I'm gonna start to pin. First, I'm going to pin my side seam to this underarm seam of my sleeve. I'm going to pin my notch, my first notch, my single notch that's on the front. Now remember, this is where your plaid should match up. So when I'm doing this, remember from that notch from your front to the notch of your back, when you pin that together, that plaid should match up. And I'm double checking. If I need to move it over, you can do that. And remember, it should match up on the seam line, not the cut line. So I'm gonna put a pin through at 1/2 inch. I'm gonna flip right at this notch. I'm putting a pin at 1/2 inch. I'm gonna flip my fabric around to see if that matches up. And yep, this silver is what I'm matching, that silver line. So that's pretty good. So make sure you do that definitely at that spot where you're wanting your plaid to match up. And then also do that towards your back notches where you want your plaid to match up. So after my single notch, I'm trying to find my notch at the top of my sleeve, because that's going to match up with my shoulder seam. And then finally, I'm going to find my back notch, and that should match up with the back notches on my back piece. Found them. Again, recut these if you can't see them through your serging. Okay, found those. I'm gonna match those up, and again, I'm wanting that silver line for my plaid print, that silver line's a little bit below, about I think 3/4 inch or an inch below my back notches, and I'm wanting that line to match up. So again, I'm going to put a pin through at about 1/2 inch. I'm going to turn this and make sure, turn this right side out and make sure it matches up. And yes, it does from here to right there. Okay, and then between those major spots of pinning, you can put in other pins as needed. And then also from here, I'm just making sure that I'm gathering my ease or pulling my ease out from my sleeve to make sure that this lines up. That my edges line up here. Okay. Once you've got all that pinned into place, you are ready to sew around this whole edge at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, after you've sewn your sleeve in at 1/2 inch, you can turn it right side out and just check to make sure it is matching up where you wanted it to. So mine looks good. So I use the silver line right here. It's a little hard to see on this camera, but I have this silver line coming from my back and matching up with my sleeve. And then when it comes around, it comes and then matches up with my front. So I did get a little off right there, so I will probably go back, rip that out, and then match it up a little better and then re-sew that point. But after you've done that, and to make sure that your plaid matches up, you've got this basting stitch. You've got one of them that's going to be still showing. That was the one you sewed in at 5/8 of an inch. You can just rip that out and your sleeve is done, other than your buttons and buttonholes that you need to put on.